Greetings, subscribe, and like this video. There are no other people's children. They usually say it in the sense that you don't have to be a parent by blood to feel kinship with a child and love him or her with all sincerity. Juliana was sure that this was the biggest lie people had invented. Her birth mother passed away when the girl was only 5 years old. It happened unexpectedly, but everything was headed for such a denouement because her father, Sergei Leonidovich, and her mother, Olga Arkadyevna, were a very unusual couple. They met when Sergei was 28 years old and Olga was well into her 40s. Keep your venom to yourself. They were a very loving and sincere couple, despite the condemnation of their relatives. The lovers were quickly married. Olga madly wanted a child and believed that a family without a child was not a real family, no matter how much her husband convinced her otherwise. As adults and mature people, they underwent all the necessary examinations. The doctor's verdict was disappointing. "You're quite an adult woman," the young oncologist said at the time. "You yourself understand all the risks you are taking. In 2 years, you'll be 50, which is a pretty big age to have children. No one can predict how your body will behave, even if you manage to conceive." But Olga was stubborn, and the heavens rewarded her for it. The desired pregnancy came, and up to a certain point everything went well. Her daughter Juliana was born 7 months old because Olga simply could not bear the due date. Her body made her understand and almost forcibly expelled the child. All this did not come without consequences. Her body sabotaged her and began to respond with numerous neoplasms, which had never been there before. Even in spite of the predisposition, Olga was truly happy and stubbornly said, "Let me spend very little time with my daughter, but fate has given me this time. And so I'll surround her with the kind of love that no one will replace it after me." These words became prophetic and a curse, hanging over little Juliana. Olga left quietly. No one even noticed. Apparently, it was the last reward her declining life had splurged on. Her husband was inconsolable, and Juliana seemed to understand too little at the time. After the funeral, life changed. Sergei devoted himself to his daughter. Of course, Olga was kind, prudent. Sensing the imminent end, Olga taught her husband everything she could. Sergei knew how to deal with all surprises, although even he was not prepared for chickenpox. It was here that Sergei realized, for the first time, how much he cherished Juliana. The little copy of his wife, which was the only way to describe her, became the center of his universe, and Sergei experienced each of her torments as his own. But as time went on, Juliana slowly grew older, and Sergei saw more and more of the late Olga in her movements, facial expressions, the squint of her eyes. It seemed impossible, but it was. At one point, he felt himself going mad. That's when the idea of getting married again first popped into his head. The man put his daughter at the table in front of him. Juliana was almost 10 at the time, and he looked seriously into her crystal gray eyes. From inside, it was as if the beloved, not forgotten Olga was looking at him. "I want to talk to you about one very important thing." The daughter nodded gravely in response, something only young children can do. "I think it's time to think about finding a new mother for you," Sergei said measuredly. "We remember our mother for a very long time, but life doesn't end there, you know." The daughter nodded again. "Yes, I understand." But something in her face changed. Sergei noticed it. He thought that Juliana might not agree with him, but his daughter's answer embarrassed him somewhat. "Dad, I don't need to look for a new one. You better find yourself a new wife. And I have one mother. Let it stay that way." Sergei agreed at the time, and he remembered those words for a long time. It's a little scary when a young child thinks so sensibly and maturely, but it seems that sometimes we just underestimate children. Anyway, Sergei got his way and decided it was time to go on living against the odds. He was the kind of person who was locked in this wheel. Work, home, and finding a life partner was not possible for obvious reasons. But if fate is interested in you, it will intervene. He met Olga at a corporate party. It was a large-scale New Year's Eve party, to which all the subsidiaries of the company came, and she was among them. Sergei seemed to have completely lost his head, and the fact that the woman's name was exactly the same as his late wife was the cherry on the cake. Sergei somehow convinced himself that this coincidence was no accident, as if he had been given a second chance that he would not miss. Only this Olga turned out to be younger and more ambitious. Daughter Yuliana, learning the name of her father's chosen one, was not happy, but did not say anything against it. After all, she understood that it was generally a matter of a relationship between Sergei and Olga. It lasted a few months, after which the couple decided that the best thing in this situation would be to move in together. "We're not kids anymore," Sergei stated, "so we can take our relationship to the next level. If you want, we can legalize them. That's easy." "Well," replied Olga, agreeing, but proudly announcing that she was no longer young and wanted some kind of guarantee, even though she was only 32 years old at the time. After all, to be a wife, not just a roommate. These words touched Sergei, even though they were a little pretentious, because in them he heard his Olga again. It was decided, and the man soon called her to the registry office. The wedding was modest, because neither he nor she were interested in a grand celebration. Olga came to Sergei's house and became a full-fledged housewife. From that moment on, Yuliana's life also changed greatly. Olga turned out to be very strict in everyday life. She was a real hostess, bossy, confident, demanding. When the girl lived only with her father, she was surrounded by love and peace. To some extent, Sergei did not require his daughter to perform any domestic duties. He was alien to the idea that cleaning and cooking should rest on a woman's shoulders, no matter how old that woman was. Olga, on the other hand, was of a different opinion. She had been brought up in patriarchal traditions, so she took this state of affairs sharply negatively. Her daughter very quickly became slovenly, unskillful, and other unflattering definitions to her. "How old are you?" her stepmother asked irritably. The question was rhetorical, because she already knew the answer. 10, Yuliana hummed back in the same tone. "At 10, you're incapable of vacuuming a room and wiping off the dust yourself? Aren't you ashamed that your father picks up your dirty underpants after you? Do you want him to what, just your—" Yuliana was instantly slapped in the face. Unaccustomed to such methods of education, Yuliana immediately roared in her voice. It is hard to blame her. She lived as a greenhouse flower, which was gently guarded from everything, and even this slap, whatever it was, felt much stronger and more painful. Of course, this is the wrong approach to parenting. In the evening, there was a scandal. Yuliana complained to her father, and Sergei, who loved the child madly, could not help but stand up for her. A scandal ensued, where Olga was undeterred. "How dare you hit a child?" Sergei asked irritably and pounded his fist on the table, the kind of typically masculine gesture used to signify the dominant role in an argument. Except that Olga did not even perceive it, and only snickered in response. "And who gave you the right to raise your voice at me?" "Vlasno," asked the woman. "Note your place, hubby. If you weren't able to raise your daughter to be a normal person, then I will." "I don't give a damn what you're going to do. You're not my mother, and you're nobody," yelled back Yuliana, whom her father had previously left in the room. Olga looked at the girl with utmost disgust. "See, she does not even know when to shut her mouth and be silent. Immediately shut up and walked out of here." The woman pointed her finger at the door. At that moment, she seemed to Yuliana like a real witch. The girl cried, "Don't you want to?" Olga's eyebrows crept upward. "Well, I'm not surprised, then I'll help you," she said. And before Yuliana could say or do anything, Olga grabbed her stiffly by the collar and dragged her to the door. With a firm hand, she threw the girl to the floor and closed the door in front of her. Poor Ileana's cries were probably heard by all the neighbors, but Olga felt like the undisputed winner. Sergei tried to object to something, but don't blame him. It was the first time he had clashed with such a strong, powerful woman and realized that she could not be defeated. It's a complicated feeling. It's hard to explain. You just understand that it is useless to fight against the man, and it is better to obey, because it is not worth it. Juliana was still crying, asking her father to help, but he could only pity her and nothing more. When the scandal had subsided, he went into his daughter's room. She was lying there with her nose on the pillow and would not stop sobbing. Sergei sighed, stroked her dark hair, and whispered softly, "I'm sorry, baby, but there's nothing I can do for you, only pity." Quietly, the girl could barely hear. She cried badly in response. "Juliana, Daddy, kick her out." "I don't want to live with her," she said. "She's bad," said Juliana. "She's not bad," Sergei objected. "She's just complicated. Try to understand her, please, for my sake." In that moment, Juliana felt betrayed by her own father for the sake of this woman who obviously hated his daughter. With all his heart, he was willing to endure Juliana's tears, just to stay with this intolerable woman. Sergei decided that life with Olga was more important than the comfort and peace of mind of his own daughter. And for Juliana, this was the point of no return. It was as if she realized to herself that something inside her had broken. Perhaps it was the bitter truth that resonated in her soul. Her mother was no longer coming, and her father had chosen a woman, not a daughter. It's hard to say what was going on in the soul and in the child at the breaking point. Everyone is looking for their own ways to cope with such an incredible burden. Juliana decided that her way out was to be a rebel. Since her father hasn't found the strength to put this woman in her place, well then it's all in Juliana's hands. And now scandals in the house have become a dry routine. No matter how hard Sergei tried, no matter how he tried to persuade his wife and daughter to compromise, all to no avail. The constant recriminations, accusations, that was what their life consisted of now. And Sergei had hoped so much that the arrival of the mistress would transform his home. Apparently, it is necessary to be more precise in formulating one's own desires. Are you going to continue to sit on our necks and do nothing? Over the table where Juliana was doing her homework. "For your information, I'm a child," the girl replied arrogantly, without even looking at her stepmother's face. "You're not a child, you ungrateful creature." Olga slapped her in the face and swept all her notebooks off the table. One sheet caught on the tip of the pen the girl was writing with, and the notebook tore. Juliana stared at her stepmother with hatred. "You're the only one capable of ruining anything." She yelled and threw herself at Olga. The girl's height only allowed her to hit in the chest area, but Olga didn't even wobble. Her eyes lit up with real hatred. "You just let yourself raise your hand against me," Olga shouted and took a frightening step toward the girl. "Well, Juliana, you are going to pay for this act for a very long time." The girl trembled. She thought that now she would be in trouble. Her stepmother would beat her to a pulp or worse. But that did not happen. Olga walked past the shaking girl, took her laptop from her desk, headphones, phone, and silently left the room. It was then that Juliana realized what had happened. False Olga had just taken all her things, in which Yulia was hiding from the outside world. Suddenly the girl literally screamed, out loud. She screamed and screamed until the doorbell rang outside. Juliana was already ready to run out and scream at whoever came, thinking it was someone who could save her from this inadequate woman. Juliana's door was locked from the outside with a key, and the girl started banging on it with all her might. Olga continued to ignore her stepdaughter, while opening the front door without hesitation. On the threshold stood a very concerned old lady, apparently a neighbor to her left or right. "Hello," the grandmother said affably, but still confused. "Grandma, hello," Olga replied with the same intonation, and it seems quite sincere. "And what's the matter with you?" cautiously asked the grandmother. "We have an educational process." Olga shrugged her shoulders. "She doesn't listen. Her father has completely relaxed her. I took away her computer, and now she's yelling and throwing herself at the door. You know, you can see for yourself." The woman stepped aside, giving the pensioner a view into the apartment. All in all, everything fitted into the story that Olga told. And the nastiest part was that she hadn't even lied about anything. It really was part of her own parenting process, and yes, Yuliana did react that way, exactly to the above things. Zinaida Petrovna poked her nose fearfully into the hallway and then nodded delicately. "Well, you go easy on her, Olga." "Okay," Granny said cautiously. "She didn't do it out of spite. She was left early without her mother. Her father pampered her all the time, but he had no choice." "But I can't help it either," said Olga. "She doesn't listen to me, she rebels. Doesn't do anything around the house. Doesn't even do her homework. I've got my eye everywhere. What am I supposed to do now that she didn't have a mother? Tell me, what will eventually grow out of the child if everyone who meets her will pity her?" "Yeah, she won't be able to do anything on her own then," the pensioner agreed. "Well, you go easy on her anyway, because she's like a hedgehog and won't let anyone in. And you also scold so much, it pains me to hear that you have quarrels in the family. You were so good, Sergei and you. But since Sergei is so good, Zinaida Petrovna, then it leaves me to be bad, to torment the child, to scold her so that she does something. And now Uliana is 14. The whole 4 years flew by in scandals and tantrums. Olga treated the girl even worse. You have 9th grade exams this year, and instead of studying and getting ready, you're always wandering the streets somewhere. I want and walk around. Are you jealous? You're not going to walk around men anymore. Your husband won't let you go." The teenage girl sneered, but Olga couldn't be offended by that. "No, baby," she grinned. "That's the last thing I'd be jealous of. Being a driveway skank might be cooler, right?" Uliana balled up her fists, yelling. It was a habit she still had. Every time she didn't have anything to answer, she would start screaming, yelling, screaming like a slasher. Neighbors still came for a while, and then spit on this matter. We were convinced that with Uliana just cannot be otherwise. Manipulative girl grows hard to say what led to all this. Is it only in the choice of father? The pendulum was set in motion a long time ago. The girl did not make any compromises. She just sprawled out and beat her head on, confronted her, crushed her. And she got what she wanted, despite Olga's efforts. Over time, the woman realized that she had been exorbitantly strict with the girl, but she could not change what had been building for many years. The girl did not make any compromises. She just sprawled out and beat her head on, confronted her, crushed her. And she got what she wanted, despite Olga's efforts. In time, the woman realized that she had been exorbitantly strict with the girl, but she could not change what had been going on for many years. She finally realized this the day she found out she was pregnant. Of course, Sergei was overjoyed. Uliana was too withdrawn and almost didn't let her father get close. And he really wanted to be a beloved, adored daddy again. Therefore, the news of Olga's pregnancy he took with the kind of joy that only a deeply unhappy person can do. "How wonderful it is, beloved," muttered Sergei, who was circling over the woman like a mother bird, not moving a step away. "Wonder if we're having a boy or a girl. I want another girl. I'll have 2 Papa's daughters. Isn't that wonderful sweet?" But Uliana did not appreciate everyone's joy. And when at dinner was told that the family will soon be added to the family, she threw a plate against the wall, screamed, and ran out into the street. No one stopped her, not even Sergei, who was easily taken in by such antics. Now, he just sat there and sighed. "We'll chill." Undeterred, commented Olga, and her husband only nodded in response. Well, what else was he supposed to do? The girl from that moment on, as if off the chain, found the right company in quotes. At 14, she tried alcohol for the first time. At 14, she had her first boy. At 14, she smoked. From the beloved and obedient, adored daughter of Sergei, now there is almost nothing left. She became defiant, dressing aggressively, wearing makeup, skipping school, and this is just a small list of her teenage sins. Before, Olga could still have some influence on her stepdaughter, but now it was all for naught. More and more often, Olga blamed herself for her excessive severity, even cruelty toward the girl, and condemned her husband for his indifference. Why did he just stand by as they swore at each other, snapping at each other's throats? But it's stupid to demand from Sergei what he can't do. In the end, it was decided to accept Yuliana's behavior and leave the girl alone for good. Olga was absorbed by her pregnancy. She became amazingly blooming, and everything was getting ready for the baby in the house. And when the ultrasound finally confirmed that it will be a girl, Yuliana realized that she simply will be replaced by another girl, certainly more beautiful, obedient, correct, kinder, gentler than her. Now Yuliana only came home at night, but she was still annoyed by everything here, especially the thin walls. Cursed walls, the girl muttered incessantly. There was no way she could hide from her father and stepmother's conversations. There was no way she could hide from her father and stepmother's conversations. Really, one such conversation made her whole body tremble. Sergei was not at home at that moment. A few days ago, he had gone to another city to hook up a new station, to install software, all the things that never interested Yuliana, but brought her father money for everything she wanted. Meanwhile, at her stepmother's house, a man came to see her. Yuliana couldn't have dreamed of such a situation. She was already looking forward to catching them together. The girl lay down on the bed and listened in fascination to what was being talked about behind the thin wall. The conversation went like this. "Victor, how are you doing?" Yawning, Olga asked why you came to us so late. "Do you need any help?" "Yes, I do." The man hesitated a lot. "You know, the thing is, my wife is away on a business trip for 3 days, your husband too." "Hey, chill out," Olga sniggered. "What are you trying to offer me now? Are you trying to remind me that I'm married, and I'm expecting a baby?" "You old dog," Olga shouted. At that moment, Yuliana sighed heavily. It seemed that there was no love connection between these two, was out of the question. But by inertia, she continued to listen to the quiet conversation. "No, that's not it. That's not what I meant. Remember what you said you owed me, didn't you?" "Well," the woman sniggered back. "Yes, you helped me. And now you want me to pay you back." "Sort of." The man grunted, and there was a long pause in the kitchen. "Well, what do you want from me?" Unable to bear it first, asked Olga. "Your stepdaughter is at home, right?" Olga nodded in response. "You can rent her to me for a few nights," and then Yuliana froze. It was as if she turned into a statue. Her pulse slowed down until it almost completely disappeared. The girl listened even harder. "No, she can't do that to her. She can't." "Yes, you can take her away, and I don't care about her." Olga replied stale. "I don't want her here anyway." "Come on, she's a good girl," the man added, to which Olga apparently snorted. The dialogue ended, and the girl heard footsteps in the corridor. Yuliana's heart went to her heels. She rushed around the room, but there was no way out. Her pulse was pounding in her temples. She was about to scream when the door opened in front of her, and there was a man, a short, stocky, stout man who looked about 40 years old. "Come with me. Why are you so scared?" "Get dressed," the man said in an orderly tone. "Come on, go to my house." Yuliana swallowed. So he wasn't going to do her right here. So he's taking her to his house. The girl was gazing around the room, not knowing what to do, and then the stepmother came in. She hovered near the door like a warden, and then sighed, stroking her big belly. "Hurry up, I'm going to bed. Bring her in the morning or drop her off before school. I don't care." Uliana herself did not understand why she kept quiet, why she obeyed. She fell into such a shock and stupor that she just monotonously put on a jacket, shoes. In the same automatic way, she followed this incomprehensible man. Perhaps she was in a state where it is already all the same what awaits you. It is difficult to say. Maybe in a few years, even a psychologist won't be able to answer what it was then. She calmly went downstairs, got into the car, and huddled in the back seat. Ahead of her awaited the frightening unknown and that nasty old man who... Yulia shook her head. It made her sick to even think about it. "How are you?" "I don't know why," the man asked. "I'm sorry it's so sudden, but I really have to." Uliana gave a squeak. "He needs it. Do you even know how to deal with children?" The girl stared at the man, at a loss. Was he really going to make her? Oh God, those horrible thoughts. We must chase them away. Uliana would just try to pretend that she didn't care about what was happening to her. The car stopped outside the apartment building. Like a zombie, Uliana followed the man. They entered the third entrance, got into the elevator, and went to the fifth floor. The doors made a distinctive zing sound and opened. The staircase was very beautiful, and it was obvious that the man was not poor, Uliana estimated. Perhaps she could blackmail him with what was going on. While these thoughts were in the girl's mind, the man opened the door and invited her in. Too gallant for such a man, but for some reason he himself remained at the door. The girl asked in surprise, "And you?" "And I'm going out. And your job is to watch my daughter. Now she is sleeping. If she wakes up, you will calm her down. But in no case do not tell her where Daddy went." And no sooner had Uliana asked the question than the door slammed behind the man. Who would have thought? Uliana had already cried her eyes out on the way here, imagining what they would do to her. And it turned out that she had been taken just to look after a child. It was a girl of about 7. Uliana watched the girl sleep. Sometimes she woke up a little, and then wondered why the girl was here again, already in her 3rd day. And she actually came willingly. "Why did you come again?" "Because I feel sorry for you," replied Uliana. "Pity? Why?" The girl did not understand. "Because no one wants you either, just as I do," said Uliana. "That's not true." Uliana only smiled back. She, too, had once believed that. It turned out that while his wife was on a business trip, this girl's father migrated to the other side of town to his mistress. Good thing he was ashamed to bring her home to her sleeping daughter, and Uliana just seemed like a free babysitter. Although no, the man did pay a little money at the end. Not much, but Uliana hinted that she knew his wife personally. The man pursed his lips and paid a more substantial amount. Uliana smirked victoriously. Blackmailing a grown man. Shame on you, you little bitch. Uliana was sure that her stepmother would answer as well, so she said nothing more, except to express her willingness to work as a night nurse again. "When the little one is born you will work," snorted Olga in response, but Uliana only shook her shoulder. She already did not care about the child, and to wait until he finally come into the world. No way. Except she had no choice, she had 3 more years to wait, and then she would be a free bird, and the page of her life would finally turn. This story doesn't have a happy ending, but not all stories end well. Remember this when you make a choice that could drastically change your life, and especially the lives of your children. Like this video and subscribe to the channel.